Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonksen, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast. We're talking with my really good friend, Alex Williams. He's done an incredible job building an amazing church, and we're talking today about in ministry. When do we know it's time to leave? When do we know that we need to stay? Wrestling with, is God calling us somewhere else or God calling us here? It's a really unique topic, but at some point we all face it. It's a great conversation. Before we jump into that, I want to remind you to check out churchboom.org. We have something called Church Boom University. Make sure you check that out. It is a subscription base, but you get resources sent to you, master classes. People like Sam Chan and others are part of it. It's an ongoing learning platform. So make sure you check out Church Boom University at churchboom.org. Let's jump into the conversation with my good friend Alex. Thanks for being on today's podcast, man. How can I serve you today? What's on your mind?
Absolutely. So my questions deal with conflict, deal with assignment, and deal with family.
Yeah.
And the first question is, when do you know when the grace for your current assignment or calling or church or job has lifted? When do you know when it's time to move on? What are some of those indicators?
Yeah, well, whenever anybody's making a move or thinking about making a move, the first question I always ask is, what are you running from or what are you running to? I think that determining question, are you running from something or running to? And I'm not saying either one of those are bad, but I think it's a clarifying question. And people are like, man, it's time for me to move. Okay, are you running from something or are you running to something? If you're running to a calling, you're running to an opportunity, you're running to what God has, that's one thing. If you're running from, I don't like the conflict or I don't like the issue or I don't know, whatever. And I'm not saying either one of them are going to present a wrong or right. I think it just allows you to really clarify, what am I really doing? Am I running to something or am I running from something?
Yeah.
And I think that's a great clarifying question. That's the first thing that I would look at. The other thing is that when I feel like there's transition happening, I ask for my own self, and I help other people as well as they wrestle with it, is, Lord, provide either a bridge or a path. A path is a way for me to find what I need to find at this current calling. Like, hey, I'm struggling in this area. Help me find a path that I stay here. Help me find a path. Sometimes it's a bridge where it's like, Lord, it's just time to leave this land that I'm on. I need to bridge over to something else. And I think those are also pivotal questions. So again, when someone's wanting to make a move or feel like they're making a move, I always ask, what are you running to? What are you running from? I think you should think about path or bridge. Do you want God to create a path? Do you want God to create a bridge? Are you open to either one of those, that God creates a path or God creates a bridge? I think that's another identifying question for people to know. And I do think that sometimes, and you have to ask this question, this would be the third thing I usually bring up is, and it's not really a question, it's more of an observation. Sometimes I think you have to have the courage to stay when it would be easier to leave.
Right.
And sometimes you have the courage to leave when it would be easier to stay. And I think those three sort of statements, questions, ideas help to navigate what I'm really doing, and is this the right move, and has it really lifted, or am I running from something? Am I lacking the courage? Do I not lack the courage? Some people need to have the courage to leave, where it'd be easier to stay, know. Yeah, more comfortable. You're making great money, and church is going good, and they're in debt. No debt, no this, no that. Everything's great. Church got 1,000 people. Life is wonderful. It's great. Then you got to ask, well, but what is God calling me to leave? So, it's hard to say, hey, I think this is when God's lifted your calling off of this situation. I think it's more of a contemplation of these questions and statements.
When you were talking, I was thinking about Moses because Moses had a call, but then he tried to get ahead of God, and he had the right passion, but he killed a guy, and then he went on the run, right? He was
Yeah,
running, and then God had to give him a burn. He didn't give him a bridge; he gave him a burning bush. That'd be easier than a bridge,
right. Yeah.
but
Well,
he
I
wasn't
think,
ready
yeah,
yet to step
yeah,
into.
yeah. And I think you have to figure those things out. You have to kind of consider that. Um, it is, but I do feel that the first question is the one that is probably most defining. Am I running to something or running from something?
Okay.
And I've been throughout my life and career as in ministry, been like, man, I feel like I'm running from something. There's times where I feel like I'm running to something. I do think it's a little better to be running to something than running from something, but I think you have to have that brutal and honest question. Uh, you know, because I think some people, if you're not careful, you kind of get that whole, it's better over there. I'm like, well, it just has a different set of problems over there. That's all.
Yeah,
Uh,
grass isn't always greener.
Yep, it's greener where you water it usually, but I do think that God, I think God calls us at times. There's times to make moves. I think there's also the practical side. I got to consider my family. I
Yeah.
got to consider my wife. I got to consider my kids. I got to consider, there's I think those are worthy considerations of, are they happy? Are they not happy? Would this be better for them? Would it not be better for them? I think you have to consider that.
Do you do you feel like if God's favor is on a person that it follows you where you go? Like as far as like God will bless you here, but he'll also bless you there?
Yeah, I do, and here's why. I do personally. I mean, in the sense of different ministry lanes, yes, because there are times I have sat in so many board meetings. I'm thinking of one right now where I've sat in so many different board meetings, not in my own life, but not in my own lanes, but like for other churches. We do a lot of executive coaching and, hey, can you come sit in the board meeting? Or, hey, we're transitioning this pastor out and a new pastor in. Could you kind of sit in on a couple of meetings and get some wisdom or whatever? And so I sit in some of these meetings, and there are times I walk away thinking, I think this board missed it.
Hmm.
Uh, I think it would be insanely naive for us to think every pastor and every board, as they prayed about it, they got the right answer.
Right.
And sometimes it's clearly like, man, this board member's going crazy and it's out of control and there's drama and there's this and there's that. Like that's just ugly written all over it. I think, most people could be like, yeah, this is a mess. And I don't know what, God's going to have to straighten out this mess. But there's times where a board will gather hands, have the right heart. The pastor has the right heart. They're praying for whatever thing is next. We're praying for this big thing. They're making a decision about a new pastor, whatever it is. I'm thinking of one specific thing. And I really felt like their heart was right. I really felt like they gathered hands and they prayed. And I personally think they got it wrong. Now, I could be wrong about that. But I think it would be naive for us to think, even with good hearts, good spirit towards each other, we still get it wrong.
Right.
And I think God has to course correct us getting it wrong.
Mm.
So to say, oh, well, you got it wrong, now I'm going to take the favor of God off your life, I don't think so, because it's like, come on, man. How many pastors with good hearts are making choices like, that wasn't the right choice? It's not a moral choice, just like I went here when I should have went there, or vice versa. I went over here. Same thing with a board. It's like, do we really think everybody got it right? No. Oh, we're just doing the will of God. I don't know. I think we're all humans. We're all incredibly flawed. And sometimes we make decisions with the best heart and the best intention, and they're wrong. And then God's got to come in and kind of clean up our mess a little bit. And it's not because it was big drama, like I said earlier, that's just clearly like, okay, you people are out of control. This is all wrong. No, it's like, man, they've got good hearts. They've really thought about it. They're making the best decision they think to make, and it really wasn't the right one. And I think we'd be naive to say that doesn't happen. It happens. And for God to go, well, you tried really hard, but you got it wrong. I'm removing the favor off of your life. Like, I don't see that happening.
Or something.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't see that happening. I think God's going to course correct our flawed decisions at times.
Okay, that makes sense. What about, so like if there's still fruit like currently in your ministry and things are happening, um, like is that a reason not to leave? Is that an indication of like God still using you? Like I think of like Elijah, the well, he God led him to the brook, right?
Yep.
But then the brook dried up, and then he took him to another place.
Yep.
So if there's still water coming, if
Yep.
it's still springing forth, is that a sign that you don't leave, or do you have to consider like all those other factors that you talked about before?
Well, personally, I think it'd be better if a pastor feels like it's time, his season's come to an end, that he hands off something with momentum, not something that's dead. Like, here you go. It's died. There's
Good
no more
luck.
fresh water. Good luck. I think it'd be a lot better to go, here you go. This thing is rocking. We are doing well. We've got money in the bank. We've got a strong tithing base. We got great people. Here you go, man. Take it to the next level. And if they can take it to a level that you didn't take it to, then we applaud that. At least in the right heart, we should. So I think we can do that. I think that we should. There's two things that I always say need to be happening in someone's ministry: joy and fruit.
Oh wow.
If one of those are missing, I know it's really simple, two really simple elementary words, joy and fruit. But when one of those are missing, there's usually a challenge somewhere. Maybe it's a challenge in their own heart. Maybe it's a challenge with their approach towards that ministry. Maybe it's indication that the time has come. I don't know what it is, but both have to be there.
Yeah.
I've seen people, man, they got a lot of fruit. They're just in the right place at the right time, but there's not a lot of joy.
But they're miserable.
Or they're miserable. Or, man, they got a ton of joy, and I'm like, I love it here. I'm like, yeah, you love it here, but there's not a lot of fruit. You got the same 100 people. You got tons of money that you keep tapping into to pay the bills. So not a lot of fruit happening here, but you're having a great time. I have a pastor in mind right now that I'm thinking he is probably in one of the best spots in all of America. If you were going to live anywhere, live there. 10 years at the church. The fruit is, it could use some improvement, some help. But boy, he's having the time of his life. They got a parsonage. They've got a ton of money in the bank. They pay him a decent salary. He's got 50 people in the church, and he's like, man, I'm getting paid well. I'm living in one of the top 3 or 2 best places to live in the entire United States. I'm good. And, I mean, he's been there 10 years. He's got no thought whatsoever of ever leaving. He's having the time of his life. But I'm like, man, dude, but, there's, you got 150 empty chairs in your service, and there's just not a lot of fruit. But there's a lot of joy, but there's not a lot of fruit. So I think both have to be there in order for us to find, I think, satisfaction, contentment. I think joy and fruit have to be there. When one's missing, I'm not saying that's a sign of like, oh, you got to leave. But when one's missing, I think it's time to evaluate.
Yeah. What if, I'm sorry, I'm asking questions that we're not.
Don't even worry about it. This is totally whatever. I like it.
Spiraling off of the same thing.
Go with it.
Okay, cool. So what if things are pretty good? There's a lot of fruit, but like the team component of like that structure of having that inner team around you to like encourage, support, all that kind of stuff. What if that component's missing? But yeah, the church has a ton of fruit. Like, how do you, if you don't feel like you can get that right team, or you're really gonna have to pray hard for God to bring different people, because the people you have now are never gonna be on your team. They don't see your vision. They don't work well together. Is that like you can't be here because you're never going to fully flourish in that environment?
I would push back a little on that.
Okay.
I wouldn't say all the way, but a little. The reason
Sure.
I would push back on that a little is because I would I would evaluate the leadership, the pastor, and the staff, or whoever there, and say, okay, if you're having a problem with the team, that is more of a leadership issue. Have we picked the right team? Okay, lots of questions come in my head. Have we picked the right team? Have we vetted for the right team? Are we attractional enough, gravitational enough? Is our leadership high enough that we can attract high-level leaders? Are we raising them up? There's our pathway for them to go from here to here. Those are the questions that I would ask. It's like, wait a minute. One of our greatest jobs is to build amazing teams that are going to push the kingdom forward through our ministry and our church. Yeah. And if it's, wow, man, my team really, is tough, difficult, this, that, the other thing, whatever what fill in the blank, I would push back and say, well, wait a minute. I think the person's got to really evaluate themselves and say, well, what am I not doing? Something is wrong somewhere. Speed of the leader, speed of the team. Something is wrong somewhere. They're picking the wrong team. Their level of leadership isn't high enough to attract certain leaders. They're not attractional enough, gravitational enough. There's not a pathway to take a 4 to a 6. Several questions. I mean, there's so many things you could dive into, but I would push back and say that I think is more of a leader issue.
The senior leader needs to be the one to take ownership of that.
100%. I would. If I was coaching a guy right now, say, whatever, and executive coaching, as Church Boom does, a lot of it. We have a lot of executive coaches. I always tell our coaches, and I tell them, hey, if there's a problem with their team, because here's the thing, you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So someone says, man, my team, I'm like, hold on, because you're about to reveal yourself.
Wow. That's really good. It kind of hits a little bit, but hard.
It does. Believe me, it does, because I have to chew my own medicine at times where I'm like, my problem with my team. I'm like, no, you're the problem. Wow. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are.
Yeah. Wow.
And you have to ask that question. So I think I would push back a bit on that.
That's really good. That's really good. That actually segues into my second question, which is about conflict with staff and hiring friends. I think I might have made a mistake when I hired my wife's best friend, who is also one of our family friends. Because now there's conflict, and when there's conflict at work, it's hard not to take that conflict at home,
right,
and shut that off. And now I'm talking about my best friend. Now her friend's talking about her friend's husband, and then that kind of stuff. So what advice would you give to me for that? Would you even hire friends? How would you go about that?
Well, I'm not. I would. I do definitely hire friends, and I have hired friends. I think that it's a lot easier to do ministry when you like the people you're working with.
Yeah.
But with that said, the vetting process can't change. So it's not like, okay, there's 8 things I'm looking for, and when I get a leader, but with my buddy, there's only, he's only 5 out of 8, but that's fine because he's my buddy or is my wife's friend or whatever. That's when I would push back and say the vetting process has to be the same on both sides. You can't, negate some of the vetting process just because they're friends of yours or because your wife knows them or whoever. That's a dangerous place to get. That's one. Secondly, the danger is when they're your friends, if you're not clear, if the boundaries aren't clear, if the boundaries, this is what I am, we're friends, but I am in charge and this is what I need you to do. If there's not clarity there, you will unintentionally choose friendship over leadership. And when you choose friendship over leadership, you're going to get hurt most of the time because now that person's getting a little bit well, maybe getting away with a little bit more. People start to recognize it. They start to question quietly your leadership and why you're not dealing with it. So there's some dangers there when you choose friendship over leadership. One of the things I always say is one of the worst things you can do for your strong leaders is to tolerate a weak one.
Oh, wow.
Because
Yeah.
they will, as strong leaders, quietly in their head, question your leadership.
Wow.
And now you're losing leadership equity with those people.
Wow.
So again, I'm not saying, oh my gosh, you can't hire a friend. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is there's got to be clarity of roles. There's got to be clarity of expectations. There's got to be a vetting process that's the same. You have to have all that. If you don't, man, you just start going down a path that I think has a lot of repercussions to that path.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they get comfortable and they feel like they can kind of argue with you. And like, obviously, you're going to hash things out. But like, when you're as a leader, if you're always conceding to someone, you can't really lead them because you're
Yep.
conceding to their argument, their disagreements and stuff.
Yep. Yep.
Does
Yep.
that make sense?
Yeah, kind of like that. Yep, absolutely. And that might, if now you're already hired the person, they're already working with you. Now you're in it. Okay,
Yeah.
now what do you do when you're in it? Because I'm giving you all the stuff to do before. But now that you're in it, I would suggest, and again, I know very little of the whole situation, but I do know that I think that a transparent conversation needs to happen. Hey, look, here's some of the struggles you're having. Here's some of the struggles I'm having with those struggles. It's causing, you're a friend, but it's causing that, like, there has to be that conversation. And then there has to be a conclusion, like, please understand, I'd love for you to work here, whatever you want to say, you fill in the blank, but I can't lean, I can't lower expectations, I can't lower standards, I can't lower whatever because you're a friend of the family. And my role, now here's where it comes down. I need to be responding this way, but you need to respond this way. I need you respecting my role. I need you respecting the position I'm put in at times. I need you to respect that and understand that. So I want to have honest, transparent conversations with you. What I need from you is you understanding that I can't bend the rules. I can't do this. Please don't put me in a position to have these kind of conversations.
Yeah. Wow.
I think a transparent conversation has to happen. If they respond properly, great. If they don't, then it goes to round 2, if you will, in a tougher conversation. But I think a transparent, honest conversation is needed.
That's helpful. Yeah. It's really helpful.
Yeah, that's what I would do, for sure.
Okay. That makes great sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what about, so like just creating more margin with family and trying to, because a lot of conflicts that I personally deal with are because I bring church home.
Yeah.
So then it's like, what tips do you, and this is an easy question, but I don't know if it's a simple solution still.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Well, it's difficult. You're an entrepreneur type guy. You're very driven. I've known you now for a few years. You're driven. You're entrepreneurial. You've grown a church, and your ability to turn, the mind off and go in this way is, it's not easy. Because it's who you are. It's what you do. It's what you think about. It's, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? What if we did this? What if we did that? It's very difficult to turn that off. I don't have a recipe for it. I don't have a recipe for it. I have a couple things that I've seen other guys do that I thought were pretty helpful. One is if the guy feels a little wound up and a little like he's bringing home too much tension, he'll drive around the block a couple times until he feels calm enough to go inside. That's one thing. I literally had a guy tell me one time, it was an older guy, and I thought, it's kind of corny, but pretty cool. He goes, there's this imagery I do. There's a plant on our front porch. And he goes, and I rub the plant before I go in. And by rubbing it, I'm telling myself, I'm leaving church life right here. When I come out of the porch the next morning, he goes, I rub the plant, and it tells me I'm picking it up. And it's a silly little thing, but it was his way of saying, I'm letting it go because my family needs me right now. I don't know if you've seen the Netflix special. I'm a gigantic baseball fan, but the Netflix special, Facing Nolan. I don't know if you saw that.
I like that stuff, though.
Oh, my gosh, it's so good. It's all about Nolan Ryan and the gazillion records that guy holds.
Chicago Cubs.
Yeah, the guy, he's just incredible. But it's like an hour and a half, documentary or whatever on his life and all that. But there was a cool thing that his daughter, who is obviously an adult, was going back X amount of years ago, and she was like, I don't know, whatever, 15 or whatever age she was at the time. She said, my dad had a really bad game. We were in the grandstands. We were waiting for him to come out of the tunnel, into the players' parking lot, and then we see him, and then we all get in the car and go home together because our house was 10 miles away or whatever. I love what the daughter said. She said, everybody came out, managers and everyone, and he's not there. And we all waited. And she goes, and people asked us like, oh, hey, is he coming out or what? Yeah, he'll come out. And this is what she said, and they interviewed him at the same time. This was his idea. I just had a bad game. I am really angry. I'm mad at the coach for this. I'm mad at the catcher for that. I'm mad at the umpire for that. I had a bad game. And so he says, I sit in the locker room if it takes an hour and a half. Because when I walk out there, they need me to be husband and dad. They don't need me to be one of the greatest pitchers in the world. That doesn't matter to them. They need it. So until I can calm down, until I can get in the car and not even talk about it an ounce, just go out to get ice cream with them and hang out with my family or whatever they do. He said, they need me to be that. And I thought that was incredible, that the family knew that if he had a bad game, they would stand out there and wait an hour and a half, not because he's being rude, but because before he gets in the car with them, he's got to make sure that he's dad and husband.
That's amazing. Wow.
Such a cool story. So I don't have this magic recipe as much as I'm mentally knowing I'm not going to bring it up. And if I am, I'm going to put my like I do often, I'll put my phone on airplane mode, which means no one can text me or anything. The world's not going to fall apart. We all lived before text. The world didn't fall apart then. And so can I figure out a way, whether that's sitting in the locker room, rubbing a plant, or driving around the block 3 times, can I figure out a way to walk in and go, I'm not going to bring it up at all. Wow. I'll pick up all the worries and all the anxiety and all the issues. They're going to be there the next morning. They're not going anywhere. And they're probably not going to get any worse while I sleep. So let me just go home and be dad and husband.
I love it. Yeah, that is helpful. A follow-up question to that is, one of my biggest problems is I'm constantly trying to create content, sermons in my head.
Yeah.
Like, because that's the way I write my messages, life. I write it like what my kids are going through, or what I'm going through, or what happened. And, so I'm constantly going.
Yeah.
How do that's helpful to me to have that. It makes me, I think it makes me write good messages, but also my wife's like, where are you at the dinner table? What's happening right now? You're obviously thinking about something else. You're not fully present.
Yeah.
That part to me is harder to turn off than putting your phone in the drawer or not talking about the conflict at work.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. I do get that. And again, I think that's practice. I think that's creating a good habit for your life. I don't think that's automatic. Now, this goes back to the phone or a notepad. I've seen guys do that before. I was talking to Mark Batterson one time. We were sitting there talking in a lobby, and he said, hold on one second. He pulls out this little note thing, and he writes like 6 words and puts it back in. We finished the conversation. I go, what did you write? He goes, I had an idea. I put it down on paper because I wanted to make sure to give you all my attention.
Wow.
And he goes, and I have learned to do the same thing with my phone. And I'll be talking, hold on one second. And then I put it right back down. I put it upside down so they can't, I don't see it. My point is I'm trying to make to that individual. But I have this ongoing notepad. I don't need to write a novel.
Yeah.
I can put in less than 8 words and I know I can come back to that thought. I'm not going to lose the thought as long as I don't need to write a paragraph. I don't need to write a full sentence. I just need to write 6 or 7 words and I know what I need to come back to. I do that probably a few times a day.
Wow.
Where I just write it and then so for me, it puts me at, I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to come back to it in 2 hours. I'm not going to forget it because it's right there. Yeah. I did that last night laying in bed. I'm laying in bed about to go sleep. All of a sudden something goes in my head. And I'm like, boom, I grab my phone, put it there, boom, went to bed because now it's out of my head and I know I can take care of it the next day. That's just for me. I'm just telling you what I do. I'm not saying
because it's out of your head, then you can kind of move on now.
Yeah, it's out of my head. I'll get back to it. It's no big deal. And I don't need to write a full sentence or my whole thoughts or just I literally write 6 or 7 words. Most of the time I write, and this is just funny, I put slashes in between words. Like let's say I say to you, I'm going to get that job description template to you. Alex Williams / job description / whatever, youth pastor / send September 10th. Like I told you, I'd have it to you by the 10th. I literally wrote 6 words instead of I need to get the job description to Alex Williams from Wyoming to make sure for his youth pastor. Like I don't do any of that. I just it's out of my head, and I just know I'll take care of it. And it's ongoing all the time in my phone.
That's awesome.
That helps me a lot. And my family, my wife gets used to it. She knows it's going to go down in a few seconds. It's not coming up all the time. It literally, if we're out for 3 or 4 hours, I might pick it up one time if I have a thought in my head, but that's about it. And I'll just dump out those thoughts and move on.
That's good.
That helps me a lot because I know I'm going to come back to it, and I know I'm not going to lose that thought.
That's really good. What if I went into the bathroom and did that? So now
you're in the bathroom every 10 minutes. They're going to think something's wrong with you.
There you go. Yeah, that's true.
We got a serious issue with Dad. Anyway, hey man, anything else? We're about out of time. Just wanted to check if anything. Nope.
No, that was super helpful. That was really good.
Oh, awesome, man. Well, dude, you're doing an awesome job, man. Keep up the amazing work. And if I can ever serve you, let me know. But thanks for jumping on today, man.
Okay, thanks a lot, Chris.
All right, buddy. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation today with my buddy Alex and just all the different things we talked about, especially about knowing when God's calling us to leave or to stay, and such an honest and transparent conversation with my good friend. And don't forget, we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, Church Boom University. We all need to be learning. We all need to be growing. We all need to be developing, and you have to find that platform. And that's what we created Church Boom University for. So go to churchboom.org, sign up for it, check it out. I think you'll find an incredible amount of tools that will help you to continue to grow as a leader. We'll see you next time on the Fly on the Wall podcast.